So what we're going to talk about tonight, and I'll pull up the deck after Jan's completed with his part of the session, but we're going to talk about funding tonight, and then also kind of move into the pitch conversation based on the information that y'all have put forth so far with your homework. To that, the homework has been outstanding. We are missing a few pieces from a couple of the teams. I'd like to see those put in. I'm not going to call you out here on the call, but because you know who you are. If you need to catch up on some things, I really think, this is really the last week for you to catch up on things, and we'll help you in any way we can through office hours tomorrow, and help you get caught up with everything. So if you need some help, just, don't hesitate to reach out. For what I saw of the content that y'all put forth in all your team folders for the first 6 weeks has been outstanding. I mean, it seems very clear to me and Shelby as we're reviewing the information that you're understanding what we're talking about, that you're reaching out beyond maybe even in your comfort zones in the scientific space, and looking at business as something that can help you launch your technology to a viable market with a viable plan on how to do that. So I've been very appreciative of everybody working through the idea discovery canvas, and what you'll find tonight when we go through the deck, for individuals like Jan who have an expectation of what they want to see in a pitch deck. A lot of the information for about 75% of the slides has been done just with the 6 weeks of effort that we put forth during this program. So this part, at this point, it will be fairly easy for you to start dropping in the bullets and the content in the deck, and we'll walk over that over the next few weeks, and I'll walk you through the deck again tonight and provide more context. So what I'd like to do now, we got about 5 after, I think everyone's in the room. I'd like to hand it over to Jan Booten from Innova Investments here in Memphis, Tennessee. Known him for about 5 years now, 4 or 5 years now. He actually was an investor in one of my companies, and I'm greatly appreciative for that, although it didn't pan out like we all had hoped for it to and planned for it to. We got pretty close to some pretty good traction points, but Jan and I have been colleagues for a number of years. Same with Shelby. We all work together in the same ecosystem, helping entrepreneurs such as yourself reach those goals and milestones of success that you're all looking for. There's no shortage of things that I don't call Jan about when it comes to funding and finance and the creative ways to put forth capital that's invested towards companies. So he's usually my go-to guy in that regard. So I'm really appreciative of him joining us tonight. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jan. Jan, did you need to be made co-host? Are you presenting anything, or are you just talking?
I do have a couple slides, so yeah, if I can throw those up, that'd be good. And yeah, the sun for the first time today is coming out right in my eyes. So, all
right, Jan, I made you co-host.
Right. Looks like I've not enabled that on this Mac yet. Let's try it this way. How's that? Can you see that? So I think Ryan and Eric will probably recognize this. We did this very early on at P2P, and it's really meant to familiarize folks that are looking to raise investment money, to kind of see what specific things investors use in their language, what's important, what's negotiable, etc. So a little bit about myself. I won't tell you too much, take too much of their time, but with Innova Memphis, we're a venture fund in Memphis, Tennessee, been around since 2007. And I've been in the venture investment industry since 2002 as an intern with a venture fund in North Carolina. So it's been over 18 years now. All the time in early stage investing, and since then I've seen over 5,000 business plans, seen a lot of pitches. 1,000 is probably on the low end, that estimate. And while I was with these funds, seen 3 IPOs come through, more than 10 acquisitions, and made more than 100 investments. Was personally part of 2 startups. One joined us as an employee, and actually my first company I started back in college. Was doing my computer science undergrad, and the computer lab just didn't have enough equipment to work on, so decided that maybe I should start a company that assembles its own computers and do it that way. So my dad actually still runs that company, and it's kind of what Michael Dell did way back. I was buying computer components and assembling them and selling them as ready-made PCs. So if there's one regret in my life, which I know you're not supposed to have, that might be one that I maybe should have stuck with that, because there really was no Dell equivalent at the time in Europe. So Innova itself, so we're a seed stage investment company based in Memphis, started back in 2007. We focus primarily on 3 areas, and we picked those because it's really 3 areas that Memphis has a lot of strength in. So that's healthcare. We do a lot of medical device investing, med tech in general. Technology in general, I mean, that's always pretty broad, but mostly looking at logistics, supply chain, last mile type of technology, with FedEx being headquartered here. We're starting to see a lot of robotics and warehousing technology in that space too nowadays. And then the third one is ag tech. It's really bringing a lot of that technology to agriculture. And that's both on the plant side and the animal side. If you think about it, has been a lot of innovation, but it was quite a long time ago. The first autonomous vehicles were really in agriculture. Tractors have been GPS guided for a long time, but straight lines only. So it's definitely kind of wave 2 of technology and innovation in agriculture going on right now. And then there's a lot of stuff, obviously, where they overlap. There's healthcare and ag tech overlap quite often, and biology space for plants. I mean, there's obviously a lot of health benefits from specific plants. How do you maybe express specific things in those plants, but also on the animal side, there's a lot of overlap between technology and the animal side. I mean, it used to be that ranchers on a large ranch, the animals can be spread over many hundreds of acres, and you have to be on a horse to figure out where your animals are. And nowadays they have a GPS tag in their ear, and you actually know exactly where they are. You also get heart rates and temperatures, and can actually monitor the herd health that way. Innova has over 120 portfolio companies. A lot of those are in Memphis. A lot of them don't exist anymore. Just like every other venture capital fund, a lot of our startups don't make it to the end. But we've created over 500 jobs within those companies. So if you're aggregated, it's actually quite a job booster in the Memphis area. Our companies hold over 80 patents, and back in 2019, the last time we measured it, generated over 50 million combined revenue. So it's really got a lot of economic impact in the region. So what you hear about, I think, Brian, I don't know if you've already shared it with him, but I know you asked Nate for a sample cap table, so maybe it's a topic that you're touching on anyway. But the next slides are really just going to touch on words and terms that you'll come across a lot when you talk to investors. So cap table is one of those, and it's really just a table that shows who owns what in a company. It's typically expressed in shares. If you're talking about a C Corp, if you're talking about an LLC, which is another type of company, you're talking about units, but they're really just the same thing. They're just like you see on the public stock exchange. You can buy shares. Private companies, startups also have shares. The way you'll typically see them is that the owners of those shares are in the rows and the investments are in the columns. What you'll hear talking about a lot about is a round of investing. So what does that really mean? Well, a round of investing means that it's a funding event for a startup. And you typically start with a pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B, and as companies get bigger and stay private, it can go up to Series F, G, E, whatever it is, as you start raising billions in the unicorn companies. But these are just names. They don't really have a specification on when is what. It's pretty fluid. What some people call a seeds round, other people might call a Series A round. I definitely, over the last 15 years, have seen a shift that what used to be a Series A is now typically looked at as a Series Seed. So it's sort of 1 to 3 million range. That used to be the Series A range. It is important as you talk to different investors to kind of look at their background, look at their website, look at what they invest in. So you kind of target them, because investors definitely fall in these different categories where they feel comfortable investing. So Innova likes to invest in pre-seed, seed, and Series A. That's when we typically tap out, and other investors might only start investing at a Series A level. So don't approach them when you're pre-revenue, pre-product. You're kind of wasting your time. Did you switch on for a reason there, Brian, or you're just back on camera?
Back on camera.
The other thing that you'll hear about is up rounds and down rounds. What you're looking for always as an entrepreneur is an up round. It means that the valuation goes up, and we'll talk about that in a second, I think. So valuation is really just the share price per share. So up rounds is when it goes up between sort of the Series A and the Series B, for example. And a down round is when the valuation or the price per share goes down. Not a good situation to be in. Obviously, something went wrong. And that could just be as simple as you overpriced your early rounds. One of the things when you take money from individual investors, quite often they're not really as familiar with the market out there. So you might sell them on, hey, this is $1 billion market opportunity, which I'm sure that your slide decks will all show once you're done with those. And then you might have an MBA on your team that says, oh, I've got this fancy discounted cash flow methodology that they taught me in finance. So I can work backwards that if we're worth $1 billion 6 years from now, today we're worth $78 million and 43 cents. So you go to a couple of angel investors, ask them for some money. They say, oh, yeah, that's a great analysis. We'll buy into that. And then you get to a VC at Series A and they say, yeah, that's all nice and good, but we don't do that. So really, we think your company's only worth 10 million bucks. So now you have a down round, and you're going to have to explain to your early investors that what they bought in on at 78 million is now worth 10 million. So they're not going to be happy. So be realistic, be positive and optimistic, but also realistic when it comes to valuing your company. So you avoid down rounds as much as possible. The third one there is a flat round. It's basically when your valuation stays the same. It's not a great situation, but it's also not a bad situation. Oh. On valuations, so it's valuation really says what is your company worth. So it's the number of shares times the price per share, dollars per share. So it's really very simple math. VCs don't have advanced mathematics degrees. So if it doesn't fit in the spreadsheet easily, they probably don't do it. So valuation is very simple, number of shares times dollars per share. Thing that we like to throw around is pre-money, post-money. If you watch Shark Tank, they miscalculate valuation because they typically talk about post-money, not about pre-money, but they kind of confuse the entrepreneur quite a lot with that, saying that you're telling me your company's worth $3 million. Well, not really, but you don't really want to correct a shark on TV. So what the pre-money is technically is the value of your company before any new cash comes in. So if I say my pre-money valuation is $2 million, it means that if I were to sell my entire company today, it would be worth $2 million. And then the post-money is really after I raise a certain round of money, how much is it worth right after those checks clear? So it's really the pre-money plus the new cash in. So that's typically what the Shark Tank sharks really look at is if I put my money in, how much is it worth? But they just call that the valuation. There's all kinds of debates on LinkedIn, etc., that criticize the Shark Tank for confusing things, etc. But I think the spotlight that they shine on entrepreneurship and investing, angel investing, is way outweighs the positive on that side to the little mistakes that they make on valuation. All right, types of ownership. There's different types of ownership. There's common stock. That's typically when you start your company. That's the piece of the pie, or it's really the entire pie that you start off with. It's all common stock. It's owned by the founders of the company. Then there is this thing called founder stock. It's really typically the same as the common stock. There are exceptions on the West Coast. Sometimes founder stock has extra rights. It's one of the reasons why Mark Zuckerberg still completely controls Facebook, even though he's not a majority owner anymore. He does have a majority of the votes because his founder stock carries more votes per share than one. Then Shark Tank, it's not on this slide. Shark Tank also has this thing called advisor shares. Doesn't exist. So it's another Shark Tank myth. It's really typically, so we'll go to the next one, which is preferred stock. Typically, as an investor, I buy preferred stock in a company. And preferred stock is just shares, just like the common stock, but it has extra features to it. It's just like Zuckerberg shares have multiple votes per share. What we typically ask for is dividends. So we get an annual dividend rate on our shares. And then we also like to negotiate for what's called a liquidation preference. Comes in two flavors. Which can be, so a preferred stock can be a participating preferred or a non-participating preferred. Getting pretty technical here, but very important for the founder. Participating preferred means that if we sell the company and I put 10 million into it, we basically take that off the top. So you get 100 million for a company, we put 10 million in, we take that off the top, so there's 90 million left to like share between the founders and everybody else, and then we share in that too. So say we're a 30% shareholder, And in this example, we would get 10 million off the top, and then we get 30% of the remaining 90 million. So that's 27 plus 10 is 37 million we get out of the 100 million. So that's pretty good because we're only a 30% shareholder. So we actually get kind of 7 million in free money. So that's the participating preferred. So keep your eye on that. If that's in there, make sure you can get a piece of flesh somewhere else in the negotiation. The non-participating preferred, the investor has to choose. So if it's $100 million exit in that same example, I have to choose. I can either take my money back, my 10 million, or I just participate as a shareholder. In which case I have to make the decision, 10% of 10 million off the top or 30% of 100. So that math is pretty easy. I obviously take my 30% at that point. But you're all scientists on this call, so you know there's a break-even point in that equation somewhere where it's balanced. So it's really there to protect the investors in a not so great exit. 100 million is obviously awesome. If I'm only selling the company for 5 million, this protects the investors that have put cash into the company to at least get as close to that money back as possible. What is very popular, it's been popular for about 5 years, is a safe investment. What a safe is basically, it stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity. So the reason why that was invented on the West Coast, actually by Y Combinator, is that it's a very simple agreement, which it even says in the acronym. It's a couple pages. It really spells out. You don't really need lawyers to draw these up, so it's also very cheap to do, very fast to do. It's typically what you should raise before you raise a normal equity round. So we talked earlier about a seed round, a Series A. The safes really only have a place before the seed round. After that, you typically work with preferred stock rounds. In the safe, there's really only a couple things that you specify. There is a valuation cap, there's a discount, and that's kind of it. Those are the two most important things. So the valuation cap means that once we get to that Series A round, for example, me as an investor, my cash that went into this round is going to be valued no more than, say, 7 million. So if the Series A has a pre-money valuation of 10 million, I would still buy in at 7 million if my cap was 7 million. So that protects me from companies that really kind of take off as a rocket, and I was there in the very beginning, that I don't have to pay the out of whack Series A valuation. The discount is similar. If I say I'm getting a 30% discount, for example, the Series A comes in at 10 million, I'm still buying in at 7 million because I have a 30% discount. My advice is raise up to about 1 million of safes and no more. At some point, you really just have to kind of bite the bullet and do a real financing round where you set a price for your company. Because there have been situations where companies kept raising money on safes all the time, and it's really hard to kind of calculate as a founder how much of the company you actually still own at conversion once they convert to real shares. So my advice is don't raise more than about $1 million in safes before you do a full round. And then the last pretty common one is convertible debt or convertible note. It's kind of what was very popular before safes became a thing. It kind of, it's easy, it's quick. while it is technically debt, accountants call it debt, but it's really fully expected to turn into shares at some point. So if I raise money, a convertible note as a startup early on, and then I do a Series A, all this convertible debt would actually convert into Series A shares as well. So it gets wiped off the balance sheet and it's all equity at that point. Also has a couple things like a discount rate, a liquidation bonus. The reason why they have been popular and are still fairly popular with angel investors, it really kind of kicks the can down the road when it comes to valuation of your company. You don't really have to set that at that point. Can be good, can be bad. You really should somewhat agree on what the value of your company is, your investors, pretty early on, because if you don't, at some point, you're going to have that discussion. And the longer you delay it, the wider that gap might get. So I'm not a big fan of convertible notes. It's really only just kind of delaying the inevitable conversation about how much your company is worth. The lead investor, or dilution first. Sorry, I'm looking at my wrong screen here. Dilution is a term that you hear a lot about. So it's really the rate at which your ownership percentage decreases in your company as you raise more money. So when you sell shares, there's a finite number of those. So when you sell some, your percentage of the company just becomes less. It's basically just a math equation. What you'll always see is the argument, what's better, a big piece of a small pie or a small piece of a big pie? And it's the advice you'll get when you're too stuck on valuation and somebody is willing to offer you $1 million and you say, I'm worth 20 million, I only want to give 5% of my company. And your investor says, no, I think you're worth $10 million. And I want 10% of your company. At that point, you really have to look at what are your options. If there's other investors knocking on your door and knocking it down, saying, yes, we're fine with the 20 million, but sure, you take that. But if nobody else is telling you it's worth that, and everybody says it's worth only 10 million, you should really consider, obviously, what you want to be. You want to be a little cupcake, or you want to be a big pie. So always keep that in mind. One nice feature that investors like to build into their shares is anti-dilution protection, which basically means that if I bought in at that 20 million valuation, and then we go to a Series B, and that investor says, well, you got it wrong. The 10 million was correct, so I'm only offering 15 million as a new valuation for the next round. The investors are actually protected, and their shares get repriced to match that 15 million valuation. You, unfortunately, as the founder, will get it in your shorts because you don't have that protection. So you actually get double diluted at that point, not just by the new money, but also by the old money that basically overpaid on its previous valuation. All right, next one, lead investor. You'll hear a lot about that, especially what you'll find when you start talking to investors about raising money is, and I think Brian probably came across that a lot when he was raising money, is we love what you do, but we don't really want to lead around. If you find a lead, please come back to us. So what that really means is The lead investor is the investor that really negotiates with the founder all these different things. So it's the valuation, the dividends, there's exemption provision, how many people are on the board. The lead investor typically takes the board seat for the investors. But also it's really the first one that is kind of putting their foot out and say, hey, we're willing to invest this much into your company. Quite often it's not everything that you're looking for. So say you're raising $2 million. The lead investor might say, look, we're good for $1 million at these terms. And now you can go out into the world and say, I found a lead investor, these are the terms, and I'm looking to raise not $1 million, but at least you have $1 million already kind of spoken for, and you have the terms, and it's much easier at that point to find other co-investors, which are the other people that come in the round. The lead investor also takes charge of drafting and reviewing legal documents. The term sheet that you negotiate with the entrepreneur as an investor is typically 5 to 7 pages. Lawyers have a habit of turning that into about 100 pages of legal documents that you end up signing. And it's also not cheap, typically $15,000, $20,000 if you do an investment round that has a lot of paperwork to go to the lawyers. The other thing that the lead investor does is help you raise the rest of that round. So as I said, it's a $2 million round. The lead investor does $1 million. They'll introduce you to other investors, etc., to try and fill that whole round. And that's called syndication. Let's see, I think that's probably about my slides on venture speak. So I'll leave it to Brian and Shelby to tell me what's next.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions come through, or hands raised actually. So if we can just open it up for question and answers for the next 10 minutes or so, I think that would be perfect. So Brad, you had a question for Jan.
Yeah, I had thought I had read or heard about preferred stock also having some multipliers with it. Is that true, or could you explain that if that is?
So it's probably the liquidation preference that I mentioned. Did I mention it? Maybe I didn't. I think I did. I'll send the slides anyway, so Brian can send to you. But the multiplier can definitely, it's kind of a multiplier. It's called the liquidation preference. And that's where if it is that non-participating preferred, for example, if I had a 1x liquidation preference, so that's that I would have to choose between my money back or just converting to common stock and taking my money that way. I should have had a glass of wine too, Ryan. Sounds like a good idea. But it's gone as much in crazy times to 5x liquidation preference, for example, where the investors can choose between 5 times their money back or converting into common stock. So at that point, the math equation obviously breaks even at a very different point of exit. And then if it's really egregious, it's that participating preferred with a multiple liquidation preference. It's really preferential for the investor. And that definitely has happened in the past. Also happens in markets where there is not a lot of capital available. So you definitely get some shark behavior sometimes. We at Innova, we like to set the companies up for being able to raise money outside of Memphis at some point in the more kind of liquid markets. So we try and structure things as close to kind of normal and accepted as possible. There is a couple national law firms that on an annual basis, they put out there what they've seen in the market on terms. So it's a nice benchmark exercise that they do. So you kind of know what market is. I think
Who is that? Who puts that out?
Cooley definitely does one. So they're mostly West Coast, also have East Coast present. But there's a couple of them out there.
And I guess I'm thinking of, like, say you have employees at your company that are on like stock option plans or incentive plans, and they have, stock options for, say, 20,000 common stock shares. With having like preferred stock in the company with liquidation multipliers, like, it becomes kind of hard to do the math unless your employees or whoever has the common stock options knows all of the terms of, all the preferred stock, liquidation preferences, I guess is a good way of describing it. What do you typically do in that situation or communication with your employees at the company?
I mean, it all depends on how transparent you want to be as a company owner. What you'll find is once you get through your first kind of hires that know the startup world, people don't ask that sort of stuff. You give them shares in the company and they're pretty happy, or they ignore them. One thing that you'll find when you're hiring people, some of them you give options to and they don't appreciate it, and you're kind of wasting your options. So one of the things in the hiring process that is a really good barometer of figuring out what kind of person you're talking to is when you make your employment offer, let them choose. Give them a couple levers they can pull. Hey, you want this much salary? Or like, kind of say you can either have 75,000 in salary and to 25,000 shares, or I'll give you $100,000 in salary and no shares, or anything in between, and see what they pick. If I'll just in it for the cash, highly likely anything goes somewhat bad in the company, their resume will be on the street and they're looking for something else. The ones that say, okay, 75 grand is fine with me, I just want shares because I believe in the upside, they're more kind of startup type of employees.
Hey, Jan.
But the way I like to explain it to employees is saying, look, we're shooting to sell this company for $100 million. We are giving you a percent of the company. So this could be worth $1 million once we sell the company. I mean, that's kind of the only way that you can somewhat make it kind of understandable, but it's obviously until you sell the company, it's worth nothing.
Hey,
Yeah,
Jan.
Thanks for answering.
Jan, I got something I'd like you to provide a comment on. Since most of our businesses that we're talking about, almost all of them, or all of them really fit into this area of bioengineering, biomedical, and this biospace, biotechnology space. Can you talk a little bit about how Memphis supports that? I mean, I know you're a lead investor in a lot of those. We've had Sweet Bio and Somovac and a lot of marquee businesses come through. Why should they launch their businesses in Memphis? What's the support structure like?
I mean, there's several things, and I don't know where you all are at in your educational careers and everything, but obviously, I guess you've all learned from Ryan and Erica, et cetera, that University of Memphis has this P2P program, so it's a very safe place to start your biotech company for 2 years after you get your PhD. Then I think we have in the biospace, we obviously have a bunch of medical device companies have really large presence here. So that is good for several reasons. They're great for mentorship. There's a lot of early kind of manufacturing flexibility because of that. There's angel investors in that space because angels tend to invest in stuff that they know, so they like to go after that. So those are the primary things. I mean, there's a good support network for it. That what I would say is the main reason why you'd want to start here.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. So we got just 3 more minutes. Let's do, is there anybody with one more quick question? And as always, if you think of questions after Jan departs, we can collect those and pass them off. Jan's gonna not be on the office hours tomorrow. He's got a conflict. But Shelby and I will, we both have a lot of experience in the same regard, so we can answer most of the questions. If we can't, we'll send those off to Jan and get back. So is there one more quick question? Okay, Jan, I really appreciate it. I know everyone found your information to be quite compelling and very helpful. I mean, it's great to have someone who is in that space, in that role of investing in companies, to have all these individuals see how much impact your company, your investment firm has had in Memphis and the resources out there. I mean, you gave a great explanation of the various rounds and how they can change and how they are changing. And so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and obviously, if as I said, if there's any other questions, let me know, and look forward to seeing the final pitches. Should be fun.
Yeah, that's gonna be great. All right, well, I appreciate it. Have a good night. If you want to stay on, you can. If you want to drop off and have that glass of wine that Ryan
Yeah, I'm gonna
stole
find
from
a
you.
glass of wine.
Yeah,
I
just
think Lita had a pretty good research result today, so
yeah. I really appreciated
taste
Ryan's
better.
daughter actually doing most of what Ryan typically does on these sessions, which is just sit there and eat ramen or drink wine. She wasn't doing either, but I'm sure she went to the kitchen and got some. But anyway, thanks, Jan. Appreciate it.
All right, see ya.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, let me just do a little bit of housekeeping. Get things back. Okay, so I am going to share my screen now. So does everyone, somebody give me a thumbs up? Memphis Scipreneur Challenge. Rohan, thank you very much. You're always right up there on my shoulder there, so that's perfect. Okay, so we get the right control. We went through startup funding. I mean, having Jan again on the call, there's several investors in Memphis. There's plenty of family offices. There's plenty of small investment firms. There's plenty of investment firms with other fractional resources, like Andrew's company last week, Sage, who offers fractional resources along with their investment. So CEO, CFO, CTO kind of roles to go along with that. The family offices are great. They're typically firms that have been created by some sort of family wealth or traditional historical wealth from those generational wealth, I should say, from those organizations, and they invest in a lot of things. There's a great family office here in town that's invested in both Somovac and Sweet Bio. So there's several opportunities for investment funding here in Memphis. The support structure that Jan laid out is very solid. It's been around for in some cases decades, but in most cases over the last 6 or 7 years, it's become a very strong organization of resources specifically focused around tech transfer. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but there's also some investment type funds that are available that you can apply for and be granted funds to create specific things around technology and tech transfer. So, if you're interested and we move forward with this, even past the presentation at the end, we will definitely help you get to those spaces that you need to be, but you have to be prepared to do that. So all the work that we've been doing for these last 6 weeks has been leading up to what I want to talk to you about tonight. And that's what we're going to go into next, which is the pitch. So on the first night, we went over the pitch. We went through every slide. We talked about it, not in detail, but we did kind of go over what the pitch was all about. I wanted to give you exposure to it at the very beginning. And then we also talked about the idea discovery canvas. And we've been utilizing that in part, or in some cases in whole, to help us move through these areas of content that you need to capture based on real information and discovery information you got through discovery to build a narrative, a story about your business, right? It's not just about your idea. It's about your business. And your business includes very important, critical things that an investor like Jan are going to expect to see. And if they don't see those things, I was talking to an entrepreneur that I'm getting ready for a pitch here in the next week for her to make to an investor. You know, I was talking to her about how she needs to convey to these investors that she understands and has a healthy understanding of everything that they are going to want to ask her about. So having these topics in this deck and having something on each slide that represents some sort of level of knowledge based on discovery, it helps individuals like Jan to believe that you know what you're doing. It provides credibility when you can deliver a solid pitch where people have questions, but they're not looking for things that are missing. And that's what this pitch deck's all about. So let's walk through it one more time. And I want to provide a little more context now that we've gone through 5 weeks of gathering information through discovery. So these first few slides, just going over the idea discovery canvas. So, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell you what the homework is as well before we get started. So by next week, I want to see the slides from this deck filled out. There's 4 slides that are kind of marked for you to skip because we haven't gone deep enough into those, but we will in the next session and over homework between now and the next section. But most of your homework is going to be going through each one of these slides, calling out factual pieces of information, and then putting them in these specific areas from these slides. And since all of y'all have done the homework and all of y'all follow along with the problem statement and problem on with the customer identification process and the solution statement that matches up with the problem and the value propositions and the competitive space and obstacles and stretch goals, what you'll realize is that for 70% of the idea canvas, you have filled out, and that coincides with this pitch deck. So right now, all the work you've done over the last 6 weeks is going to help you fill out this information on this deck. We're not going to worry about polish, although you can add any design that you want and you can make it as polished as you want. We're not going to worry about necessarily making it concise, although I will challenge you to do so. At this point, what I'd like to see for next week is just bullets. Pick out facts, 1 sentences out of these things for each individual section and just bulletize them like you see on this deck right now. We will worry about turning this into a more compelling, visually stimulating deck next week. And we'll talk about those. But first, we want to get the content out of those different documents out of your brain as a team, collaboratively putting them into this deck. So going to the deck itself, we discussed this in the first week. The problem statement is what you're going to be illustrating here. Do you need to put who, what, when, why, where? No, you need to build a slide that shows and illustrates your problem. If you can illustrate your problem better than verbalizing it, then I encourage you to do so. Having bullets, a bunch of them, is a great way to start getting the content to the deck, like I said, but is definitely not the best way to present the information to the end user. You're going to have to be very, compelling, both visually and informationally. So, take that problem statement, pull out the facts, and all you're doing is talking about the problem. If you had a sentence at the end of your problem statement, which many of you did, that I encouraged in some cases, that talk about your solution, in a very high level ending sentence to your problem statement, do not put that in here. Just the problem alone. 2 slides down the road, we're going to see the solution pop up. Okay. So just break down the problem statement and put it on this slide in kind of a bulletized format. Next, we talk about the market and customer. All of y'all broke down your personas. All of y'all have identified your key target customers. This is where you're going to put this. Avoid talking about the total addressable market and all these big numbers here. Really, you're just trying to identify a person here. This is not about the raw data that you found in your discovery process. This is about connecting with your audience. Just now that you've just talked about this big hairy problem about cancer and not proper formation of heads and babies and different things like that, right? You've set the stage for a very moment, right? And if you didn't hear me kind of huff, that's what I'm kind of doing there. It's kind of like, oh my God, kind of thing, right? So you want to talk about the problem and how hairy it is, and you want to talk about the people that are suffering from it. This is when you can put in information about pains that we talked about in the value proposition canvas as well. So utilizing all that information, talk about your customer here, identify who your customer is so your audience can identify with what you're trying to do. If you want to do, hey, this is Jim, or hey, this is Sally, that's fine. Sometimes it comes off corny, so watch yourself. But if you want to basically build an avatar of sorts in this area that represents your key target customer, that's something good, and people are going to connect and resonate with that. Then the solution. Now's the time you take that solution statement and break it down into bulletized forms of how you're going to match. And it should look back. If you look back at the problem statement bullets and the solution statement bullets, remember those need to be in sync with each other. So take the problem statement, take the solution statement, bookend it around that customer that you're trying to build a rapport for with your audience. Unique value propositions. We did a whole canvas and some other tools to talk about how you can identify those things that relieve pain and provide gains, right? So those gain things and those pain things are very important to both illustrate in the pains earlier when you're talking about the problem, and now you're talking about how your solution is going to deliver real solid benefits to that customer that you identified 2 slides ago. So take that information, bulletize 3 to 5 key value propositions. So prioritize those. When you have a list of 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 of those value propositions, this is where you need to go and pick the biggest and the best 3 to 5 of those. I like 3 or 4, but if you have 5 really solid ones, put them down. Anything else is going to start getting convoluted. Even if they're big as the first 5, if every value proposition is this big, huge delivery of value, people are going to think it's a little suspect at some point, thinking, what are you trying to do? You're trying to deliver too much too soon. That's what you do over time. I saw a lot of great competitive analysis matrices tables when I was looking at the information, and the ones I didn't see a table, I saw the data or the content just in a Word form or some sort of spreadsheet, but all y'all have the raw data to do this. Only 1 or 2 still need to fill out their competitor space, and I marked that in the comments, and a little bit more on the feature side. But most of what I saw here gives you the ability to fill out this matrix table of your competition. I've seen 2 different types when I'm looking at them. Some have the features down the left and the competition on the right. Some have the competition on the left and the features on the left. And guess what? It matters none. Okay, do it however you think it works. Most of the time we do see them kind of businesses on the top and the features going down as rows. But there's no right way or a wrong way. There's only the way of doing it and providing this information, because again, they want to know the market space. If you go and leave off the competitive advantages or your unfair advantage in the competition, that's going to be the first thing they ask you about. If they haven't, they'll already have disconnected from you and started pulling up their phone and Googling very simple terms that describe your product and seeing how many competitors come up, and they will make you look like a fool in the end if you don't have that information. Again, that is not going to scare anybody off from a venture capitalist perspective, unless you're looking at a space that is so overwhelmed and saturated with competition. It just doesn't make sense for anyone to go into that world unless you're revolutionizing and disrupting that part of the industry. So they want to see competition. They want to see that there's a market that's already somewhat established and that you're going to disrupt and take on a large market share with their investment. Okay, so I'm going to go over these slides really quickly, but these next 3 slides and then one after another, the next we go over down the way, I want you to just skip because we haven't gone into it enough. I'm going to send some more information. We'll, condition the end panels with what we have gone over, but I do want to have something in here by the time this is all done. But I want to focus on getting the major parts of the content of the deck first before we dive a little bit deeper into some of these next slides, including this one, which is just a general go-to-market strategy. How are you going to get your product to market? Where are the customers going to find it? This has a little bit to do with your marketing. It has a little bit to do with your distribution. If you have someone, a third-party reseller or value-added reseller, that would be in this space. If you were doing reimbursables through insurance companies and you have coding situations that you need to get a code into the new list of codes or whatever the most current code set is. It's been a while since I've been in that space. That's all part of this. That's all part of that go-to-market strategy. So we're not talking about numbers here. We're only talking about how are you going to get it out there to your potential purchasers and customers. But we're going to skip that this week. I just want to go ahead and plant that seed. Next is the business model, how you're going to make money in this. It's very important on discussing how you're going to monetize this, whether it's a freemium to a premium model, or a premium model that has in-app purchases if you're doing some sort of app, or if you're doing a subscription-based service, a software as a service, or a service as a service. We're seeing that come out now. That's kind of in that gig, more of that, but that really launched with that gig environment from Uber that we've talked about, and Airbnb. But this is basically how you're going to do that. In fact, the go-to-market strategy and the business model for Airbnb was quite compelling. It was basically telling them that we're going to go to market and we're going to attract, engage, and delight hosts, people that own homes that are willing to have people come in and share space with them, or have dedicated space in their home. And so it was a multifaceted kind of go-to-market business model strategy that showed financing along the way. And that's what you'll put in this slide. So we'll do something very high level before the end, but we are not going to worry about it this week. Revenue models the same way. So this is where they do want to see how big the market is, how much of that market you're going to capture, and what that value of that capture is worth to the investors and to your company. So this is where you dive a little bit deeper. We're going to do something very high level. I'll discuss this with you next week to give you a revenue model. With this shortened period of time and what y'all are working on part-time, no one's going to expect a very in-depth revenue model when we do our final presentations. But I do want to have here to show that some thought has been put into that, and there is a plan on what we're going to do as far as how to make money. But we'll discuss that next week too. There's going to be some things I'm going to challenge you with as far as homework to kind of start thinking about cost. Remembering back to what Andrew talked about last week, I didn't get to listen to what he said yet, but I know him and I know what he discusses. A lot of that financial stuff y'all discussed on breaking down costs and everything else will help you with these last 3 slides as well. Okay, so something we are going to do for this week is to put down traction or progress. We haven't really talked about that, but we have talked about it in different ways, meaning we've just, I've heard this is where we've gone through these level of clinical trials, so on and so forth. This is where you're going to put down the detail of what you've done to date. You can even put the Scipreneur challenge in here. I see almost every business I look at, everything that Shelby has looked at, many of the ones that Jan looks at, that have gone through an accelerator program, they tout that, they put that on there. We're graduates of the Memphis Scipreneur Challenge 2021, or we're participants in the cohort, what have you. I certainly put that I was a graduate and a finalist for StartCo and a few other accelerator programs that I've gone through or been finalists for. And I put that on there as traction because that's effort, that's work. You're working on your business through these accelerators. So when investors see that they don't dismiss that as just lost time. They know you are working on your business and probably doing so with very, very limited resources to do that. So the idea here is to paint a picture that even with the limited resources you've had to date, you have gained traction. You have gone through, in your cases, you have gone through in-house trials. You have gone through maybe different levels of lab testing and so on and so forth. Maybe you've acquired advisors. You've brought advisors onto your team that are very, very well known in the industry. So bringing and recruiting talent is something to tout. Anything you can think of right now, bullet-wise, that you've done traction to date is going to be good here. Just drop it in. The ask, this one we're also going to skip because we haven't talked about how to quantify what you need, but we will discuss this the next week on a few things, just kind of make sure we've covered the gaps. Some of this is basically what you just heard because you're going to be looking at this point for seed funding. Seed funding is what was just described as something to kind of get you off the ground. Maybe even it's something to afford you building out an MVP, and it's maybe even something that you can generate revenue with. And if you can, that is awesome to what an investor wants to see, that you've built something with very little, you've launched something with the right set of features based off the customer feedback and the value propositions to cure a problem, and you've done so with limited resources, and now you're showing revenue and monthly occurring revenue. That's very compelling. So what we're going to put here is enough information to convey to them that you understand what the next step is going to cost, and that you're also saying that you're not going to pull that out of your own pocket. So in most cases, thinking back to Somovac and thinking back to Sweet Bio and being alongside them as they're launching, those first few rounds in the seed rounds were $50,000 here, $25,000 there, small little grants or small little competitions. I mean, you start putting everything together. And I think they were, their first seed round was somewhere in the 300,000 range. And then their second seed brought them into the 850 range. And that helped them get into the FDA process for Sweet Bio. They did some seed rounding in the first year. And then they landed $3 million for 3 years with $1 million each year. And they were tied to milestones in the FDA process are called tranches. And that wasn't discussed with Jan, but those are just different milestones. Basically, all that being said is thinking along the lines of, trying to bring on capital investment. We need to put an ask in here. And that's really what you're going to be asking after you've convinced everybody how great your idea is and how you understand the customer and what the customer's expectations are and how you're going to go to market successfully and how you understand you're going to take a very small piece of a very large pie and grow that over time. This is what it's going to cost you to get to the next step, not what it's going to cost you to get to the end. There is no end, only what it's going to cost you to get to the next step. I shouldn't say there is no end. Acquisition is an end. Scuttling your company and making it no more is an end. Those are ends we want to avoid, though, and getting the right investment at the right time for the right things is what we're talking about here. Then the team, I want you to do this slide also. I want you to put your names for each of your team members, including the person that owns the intellectual property. I want you to gather little thumbnail images of pretty smiles and faces and everything else and put those above those. Below their pictures, I'd like you to put their name. Do not, if you don't mind, put a role. Don't say I'm CEO and CMO and CTO. At this point, you're chief of nothing. And I tell that to every founder, and just as a side note, when I look at decks as an investor and I look at decks with investors and I see a bunch of C-level suite of a company that's barely off a napkin, I laugh, maybe inside, sometimes out loud. But the idea is that you are, like I said, chief of nothing at this point. So if you're going to put something in there, what I would put is the words, the adjectives, or the areas that you're working in: technology, marketing, distribution, operations, human resources, finance. That's the area that means something. The investor wants to know that there's somebody on top of those areas, not that someone thinks they need to be the COO of a company. That comes later. All right. So, and I'm not to say that structurally or formation wise, last week we talked about that you won't have someone that's labeled as the CEO in the organization and operational documents of your business, but that doesn't mean, you have to tout that at this moment. So anyway, back to it. Good looking pictures are the best, or whatever they are, the ones that are approved by each individual, their name. If you want to put their role, that's great. If you want to keep everybody at the same, that's great. Any advisors, I'd like you to put that also. If you have terminal degrees and postdoctoral degrees and everything else, put your alphabet behind your name, and then just leave it at that at this point. All right, because that's all we're talking about, and that's all we're trying to do is put forth faces to your business to show that there is actually a team. But it is very important to put advisors on there and other critical players that are not part of your founding team or not part of your employee team, but these are connections in the ecosystem or in your industries that are very important and will help you get to those areas. So for y'all, it'll be the scientists who create the intellectual property. It'll be the physicians that you might be working with. It'll be any subject matter experts that are critical key members of the success and launch of your business. So a couple other things that we need to talk about, so that are key points. They make more sense now to talk about them than when we did in the first week. So when you get to the last slide, this is just a little pro tip. A lot of people will put up a big slide that says questions. That's actually a fairly wasteful way of ending your deck. I always like to end with certainly either the thank you is good, or the smiling faces of my team. Or if I have done a lot of traction, I'll flip back to the traction slide, or I'll say that slide again at the end, or my revenue slide, or my go-to-market, something that was really amazing. Maybe I bring back Jill, Jane, Sally, or Tim, whoever avatar I created at the very beginning, in an environment, an image of him or her in an environment where all of their pains are gone away by my product, right? So something compelling. Don't waste that last slide by just saying questions. a little not so well known pro tip there. The imagery. So we need to see things. I said this earlier, when I am looking at, and this is not just me, this is everyone. When you're looking at a deck and that all is in the deck and it is bullets and content and words, two things happen. One, I'm reading when I should be listening. Because if you're going to put the words and the sentences up there, my brain is naturally going to start just reading, and that's natural for anybody who can read. So it's going to happen. And if they're reading and not listening, they're disconnected, and you've lost them. Then all of a sudden, you're on the next slide, and they weren't done consuming the content, and they weren't listening to you. Now you lost them even more. So the idea here is that we're going to try to get from not this week to next week, but next week to the next, to visually stimulate and engage the audience through imagery. So this slide here gives you a good example. All I've done is taking, and if you've noticed all my decks, I've gotten nice pictures. Remember, there are royalty situations, so don't just go grab somebody else's intellectual property. But if you have access to stock photography or Getty or Adobe, that's great. Google does a lot. Just make sure you're not getting them from any place that has a royalty situation going along with it. But what I've done here is I've got a big hero image, just a large image. I put a black mask on front of it, just another layer that's black, and I change the transparency to about 30%. And what happens now is I can change it even more. I can put different things, the words pop out, the imagery pops out, so I'm getting the compellingness of the image behind it, and I'm putting content on top of it. So this is a good kind of way to add. I want to see this on every slide? I've seen it done very, very well on every slide. So every slide in the background had some sort of image that went along with that slide. Can it be monotonous and kind of overwhelming? Absolutely. So be careful. Less is more, but we don't want to sacrifice, or how should I say this? We would rather sacrifice words for images. So don't go less is more on images, do less is more on text, but still get the message out there. So if I see that there's too many images and you need more text, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you the opposite as well.
What was the good stock image location you said, Brian?
Getty Images, Getty is one. Adobe has a really, really, really large, and they bought up a couple other stock houses. And there's a few more out there. Most of those are going to cost you money though. So Google's good, just do a little bit of legwork. Honestly, for our purposes, because you're using them for a kind of a private setting, don't worry about putting alt text and little copyrights and everything else. I'm saying just don't go steal a Monet and put it on there and say it's yours. That's pretty much what I'm saying. Ryan's family thinks what I'm saying is very funny apparently. Okay, so this is the other thing. So, I don't mean to sound derogatory about being OCD. I have tendencies myself, but when I'm talking about pitches, I'm talking about getting very OCD on these things. So it's not a big concern this week to next week. It's not even going to be that big of a concern between that week and the next. But by the time we do the final pitch in week 9, I want y'all all to be combing over that deck so much that there's no issues. There are people like me that key off on every little mistake of your PowerPoint presentation. That's mostly because I've just unfortunately had to create thousands over the years. But there are also things that everyone gets kind of keyed off on. Lots of different fonts, going crazy on kind of scripted fonts, doing things like that will key off a bunch of people. Bad grammar, oh my God, you'll lose half your audience if you have a lot of bad grammar. From the grammar police to just the people that just can't read and understand what you're talking about. So you need to go through this deck over and over again. Everything counts either for you or against you in the pitch. Check each slide dozens of times for typos and grammatical mistakes. Pay attention to alignment. That always throws a lot of people off if things are all over the place. Be very consistent from slide to slide. Not that you can't make adjustments, but make sure those adjustments flow from across the slide. So if you're changing directions and you're changing where little angles and wedges go, just make sure it makes sense and it's not just really abusive to the eyes when you go from slide to slide. Don't, like I said, don't mix in a bunch of fonts. Don't overdo the bullets. Make sure your deck and verbal pitch match the time allotted. So if you're going through your deck, make sure that your narration goes along with it, either because someone else is advancing the slide or you're advancing the slide. But if you're real excited and compelling and you're delivering some big, huge point and you're waiting for the wow factor, but your slides are 2 slides ahead of you or 2 slides behind you rather, you've lost everybody. Try to avoid there's a couple more bullets that I want to go over that aren't here, but try to avoid using videos. Remember, technology is always going to be against you. Even in today's world where we're becoming so used to technology, videos fail all the time. They lag all the time, especially if you have them stored in the cloud. It's best to make sure your deck is in a 16:9 resolution, which is in the deck template that I sent you, so you don't have to change anything, because it's going to give you the best imagery and look and feel for everything you want. Plus, you can add more to your screen. So that should be the case. You just want to avoid any area where your presentation can fail. Now, to that, the only people in an audience that know you've messed up in your deck are the ones that helped you create the deck, the ones that helped you practice, and the ones that have been watching you practice. Everyone else in that audience, including the panelists, do not know what you're presenting, so they do not know that you've screwed up. So if you have screwed up, which I do all the time in things, but I also move forward rather quickly and don't even worry about those things. So there is no recovery because no one in the audience really knows that you messed up. So just keep moving forward, keep working with it, try to reduce, do as much risk mitigation as you can early on to make sure that your deck is going to work properly. And there's a few more things. One more thing in particular that just occurred to me that we talk about a lot, and you'll hear this again, is, don't start off the presentation asking everybody in the audience a question. Hey, how many people here have ever bought a house? In this world, there are as many people renting houses that have never bought a house. There are cities that are mostly pedestrian type cities that are apartment buildings and condominiums. Don't assume with your question that you're going to ask a question and people are going to raise their hands, because that does rarely happen. People are going to do what you say because people never really want to do what you say when you're trying to tell them something in front. You're wasting time. And the worst thing of all is you alienated all the people in your audience that didn't know the answer to your question. How many people in the audience have bought a house in the last 12 months? That might be 10% of your audience. So that other 90% doesn't care. Maybe not the whole 90%, but a large percentage of them. So don't try to, don't do anything that's going to alienate your audience by putting them on the spot or asking them questions, everything else. Just flow. Just start your narration and flow through it as best you can. Mess up, keep moving forward, end it strong, and get your money. That's what I want to do. Okay, so sorry, I told you he was going to be in every deck, and this week I decided to double up. I couldn't think of anything to say. All right. So any questions before I go over the homework again? Just come off mic and ask me. Or come on to mic, I guess I should say. Okay. All right.
We're gonna, Brian, are we gonna get, I guess, the chance to practice this pitch deck with you or Shelby or Ryan or Erica a number of times, or like what's the plan behind that?
Yeah, so let me pull up the schedule real quick, and this is, everybody can go to this if you're, afterwards if you have more questions about it. So we're in week 6. We got week 7 and 8, and we purposely put 2 weeks in between. That's why we've been jamming a lot of content in these first 5 weeks since the first day, 6 weeks since the first day. A, because we knew you could handle it. B, because we knew it was the right pieces to help you with the pitch. And C, so we can have 2 weeks of practice. All right, so tonight your homework is going to be what I said, which is go through each slide of the deck, take the content that you already have in your various documents in the folders, bulletize each one of those slides. If you have time, go ahead and maybe work on cosmetics or anything else. If you have time, go ahead. What I don't want you to do is I don't want you to start changing bullets so where we lose the content off the page because you've gone ahead and changed everything to something graphic. So let's first start with the content. If you want to make polishes and cosmetic changes to the deck itself, background images, putting your colors in there, your logos and everything else, you got time to do that. Go ahead and do that too, because you're gonna have to do that before too long anyway. So moving into next week, what we're gonna do is actually each team is gonna walk through their deck and present. But it's loose. I'm not going to ask you to be in presentation mode. Really, I'm going to ask you just to walk through each one of those slides and talk about those bullets. I'm going to provide you feedback. Shelby's going to provide you feedback. Ryan and Erica, who've gone through this and seen this, are going to provide you feedback and kind of just talk to you. And what we're going to do for the end of next week is get everything as locked in as we can on the slides content-wise. And then I'm going to give you a few more things to work on those slides that we skipped for this week. And then in week 8, which is April 8th. So week 7 is April 1st. No, it's not an April Fool's joke. Week 8 is not, it's just coincidentally April 8th. And that's when we're going to do a more polished dress kind of walkthrough, but no one's being graded, right? So if you mess up and we work you or we stop you or we make you start over, those are all things just to help you do that. And then between the weeks 8 and 9, if you want to reach out to Erica, Ryan, Shelby, or myself and schedule a time to do your pitch walkthrough 1 or 2 more times. I mean, I know I would sit with all 6 teams or at least a few of y'all and let y'all pitch through it 2 or 3 times leading up into week 9. We want to provide as much resources as we can as we've had them offered to you all program to make sure that the final presentations are as strong as they possibly can be. So that's all we're going to be focusing on these next 3 weeks. Okay, so we do have office hours tomorrow from 4 to 6. Erica, Ryan, Shelby, and myself are all going to be available. We'll put those, Shelby will send a recap like she's done every week with that sign up. So Shelby, if you can just put all 4 of our names on that, that'd be great. Sign up for whoever you need to. I'll be on my Zoom and we'll each have our own little Zooms. You can join us. I think that's how we've been doing it. Anyway, we'll send out instructions and everything else on how to do that. But we'll be available from 4 to 6 tomorrow to answer any questions. If you've done some legwork on your pitch, that's great. If you want more content help, just let us know and we'll talk about it. If you have more questions for Jan, send those to Shelby or I, and we'll pass those on if we don't have the answers for him. And Jan also said he's just had a really an extremely busy week. I've known many of the things he's been working on this week, so he doesn't really have the time tomorrow. But he did say that he'd do one-on-one sessions with any team that was needing some additional help. So Jan is also a resource as well, just not tomorrow.
Hey, Brian, real quick, office hours are actually from 2 to 4 tomorrow.
Okay.
If we need an adjustment to that for your schedule or anything, we only have one team.
No, I just need to update the schedule. I had 4 to 6 on the website. So yeah, no, 2 to 4 would actually be perfect.
Okay.
When did you say Jan had availability, Brian? Like not this week or next week, but you said sometime after that? Yeah,
no, I mean, probably next week. I mean, he said he just had to get through this week and end it because he just had not enough. He just had a lot of things going on this week. So, but he said, soon thereafter, he would meet with anybody that needed to be need some help. Any other questions? I said this at the beginning. I think everyone's in. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I just had a quick question about last week's recording. Will that be on YouTube?
Yeah. Tomorrow, I'll have this one and last week's up there on the YouTube channel.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So, like I said at the very top of the session, I think everyone is really well along. I'm very pleased with the effort that y'all put forth. I think the content that y'all have created is right on the money. Could it be with more experience gotten to a little bit easier? Next time it will be, because you've already gone through it once. So I mean, I think from an educational perspective, you've certainly reached the bars that Shelby and I had hoped to see from an education perspective. I know Ryan and Erica are pleased with everyone's progress as well. I know we're going to finish the next 3 weeks strong and make great presentations to the panel at the end. So just want to thank everybody for their active participation thus far, and let's finish the race by running all the way through the finish line.
Well, what were the prizes again, Brian? We just need a reminder.
Ryan, that's your favorite part to talk about. Go ahead.
Yeah, so each team member of the first place team will get $499. Second place, each team member will get $400, and then third place will get $300. And then everyone who participates will get something.
Everybody's
So
winner.
Was there a plan to do like any kind of networking events like with Memphis Made, like you mentioned, Ryan, or like some kind of post-COVID meetup if people have been vaccinated?
Yeah, that's something that we had planned on doing after last year, but then of course, like you just mentioned, COVID happened. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, that's something in the works that, you know, we haven't really planned yet because we don't know when everything will kind of open up. But as soon as it does, yeah, that's definitely something we're going to do.
We could do something like in smaller groups, like if we wanted to keep it to like groups of 5 or something, or whatever you guys think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, sign up for office hours tomorrow. If you want to work through anything with any of the 4 of us, let us know if there's other times that need to be considered. We can pass on Jan's information to anybody who wants it. You know, we have it on the website as well. So without any other questions that need to be answered, I think we can call it a session, and I really appreciate everyone's time. So great job, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.